Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a world where cherry blossoms drift through the air, with a clash of samurai, swords rings out in the distance, and the delicate rituals of the tea ceremony unfold in serene silence. This is feudal Japan. From the rise of the Kamakura shogunate in 1192 to the fall of the Tokugawa era in 1868, a land we're often told is steeped in honor, beauty, and warrior mystique. But as an independent historian, I'm drawn to the stories that linger in the shadows, the ones too raw, too uncomfortable for the grand epics of samurai and shoguns. Today, I want to take you behind the polished veneer of this world, to walk with the women of feudal Japan, whose lives were shaped by a relentless system that turned their existence into a quiet, unending struggle. Their stories, often ignored by the history books, are the heartbeat of this era, and it's time we listen. Picture a young girl in a small village around 1650 during the height of the Edo period. Her hands are already rough from helping her mother weave straw mats, her days filled with chores that never seem to end. From the moment she could understand words, she's been taught that her purpose is to serve, first her father, then her husband, and one day perhaps her son. This wasn't just a family expectation. It was the law of the land, woven into the very fabric of society by Confucian ideals imported from China. A woman's virtue, the scholars wrote, was obedience, humility, and devotion to her family. These weren't just ideals. They were chains binding her to a life where her own desires were irrelevant. In the treatises of the time, it was clear a woman must be a shadow, moving silently behind the men who defined her world. This girl, let's call her Hannah, knows that her future hinges on marriage. By the time she's 12, her parents are already negotiating with another family, perhaps a samurai clan or a wealthy peasant household. Marriage in feudal Japan wasn't about love. It was a transaction, a way to forge alliances or secure economic stability. Hannah might be betrothed to a man she's never met, her fate sealed in a deal made before she was even born. She learns of her wedding weeks before it happens, her voice absent from the decision. Imagine the weight of that moment, knowing your life is about to change forever and you have no say. If Hannah fails to please her husband or his family, whether through illness, infertility, or a perceived lack of obedience, she risks divorce. And divorce wasn't freedom. Returning to her parents' home could mean rejection, her family shamed by a failed marriage. In a society obsessed with honor, Hannah's worth is tied to her ability to endure. But the home she enters as a bride is no sanctuary. Within the walls of her new household, violence is a constant shadow. If Hannah disobeys her husband or mother-in-law, perhaps by speaking out of turn or failing to complete a task, she could face punishment. A few blows with a bamboo stick, days locked in a room without food, or worse. These weren't exceptions. They were the norm, accepted as part of the martial order that governed feudal Japan. The laws, like the Bukeshohado for the samurai class, upheld male dominance, offering Hannah no protection. If she sought help, she'd find none. Neighbors and relatives stayed silent, unwilling to interfere in family matters. Alone, she navigates a world where her suffering is seen as natural, even necessary. And then there's the hypocrisy that cuts like a blade. While Hannah is held to an impossible standard of fidelity, her husband faces no such scrutiny. Samurai and daimyo, the feudal lords, openly keep concubines, their extramarital relationships celebrated as a sign of power or political strategy. But if Hannah is even suspected of infidelity, whether true or not, the consequences could be deadly. Among samurai families, where honor is everything, a woman accused of betraying her husband might face exile, public humiliation, or execution. The double standard, rooted in Confucian morality, keeps Hannah in constant fear, her every action watched, judged, and weighed against an unattainable ideal. Now, let's step into the courts of the daimyo, where women like Hannah's cousin, perhaps, serve as concubines or secondary wives. These women, often from lesser families, are tools in a larger game of power. The daimyo's official wife comes from a prominent clan. Her marriage a strategic alliance. But the concubines? They exist to produce heirs or cement deals, their status precarious, dependent on the Lord's favor. If that favor fades, they could be cast out, sent to a monastery, or returned to their families in disgrace. Their lives are a delicate balance of survival and humiliation, their futures hanging by a thread. Education, you might hope, could offer a way out. But for women like Hannah, learning is just another form of control. Samurai daughters might be taught to read, write, or play the kodo, but only to make them marriageable, to polish their image for a powerful husband. Peasant girls like Hannah receive no such instruction. Their lives are consumed by labor, their minds left to wither. To seek knowledge beyond these boundaries is to invite suspicion. A virtuous woman doesn't question, she serves. And so, Hannah's world shrinks, her potential buried beneath the weight of expectation. The stage is set, and the shadows are deepening. As we move forward, we'll walk into the darkest corners of this world. Places like Yoshiwara, where women were trapped in a cycle of exploitation, and households where their bodies and spirits were broken by the very society that claimed to honor them. Stay with me, because these stories deserve to be heard. Let's leave Hannah's village for a moment and step into a different world, one that glitters with lanterns and silk but hides a far uglier truth. We're in Yoshiwara, the infamous pleasure district of Edo, where the air is thick with the scent of incense and the sound of shamisen music. This is the heart of the green districts, the licensed quarters where women sold, coerced, or abandoned, live lives of unimaginable hardship. Picture a girl, perhaps only 13, named Aiko. Her family, crushed by debt, sold her to a brothel to survive a famine. She arrives in Yoshiwara with nothing but the clothes on her back, her eyes wide with fear. Here, every part of her life is controlled. She's ranked among the women. Some, the elite oiran, are trained in poetry and dance, their beauty a rare commodity. Others, like Aiko, are relegated to the lowest tiers, their bodies offered to any client with coin. Life in Yoshiwara is a slow death. Disease, syphilis, tuberculosis, spreads like wildfire with no medical care to stem the tide. Aiko works grueling hours, her body and spirit worn down by cruelty from both clients and brothel owners. The oiran, though more educated, are no freer. Their elegance is a facade, their lives as precarious as Aiko's. Freedom is a distant dream, often impossible. A woman might labor for years to pay off her debt to the brothel, only to find it inflated with endless fees. If she survives long enough to leave, the stigma of her past clings to her. Society, the same one that drove her here, now shuns her. Families refuse to take back daughters who worked in the pleasure districts, and marriage is a fantasy. Aiko might try to start anew, perhaps opening a small shop, but scorn follows her, a constant reminder of a life she didn't choose. Pregnancy in Yoshiwara is a curse. Children born to prostitutes are rarely wanted, especially if the father is a client who disappears into the night. Brothel owners force women like Aiko to undergo abortions, using herbal concoctions that cause excruciating pain or death. If a child is born, its future is grim, abandoned or raised in the same oppressive world. Aiko, if she survives, might be left infertile or scarred, her body bearing the cost of a system that sees her as disposable. Now, let's shift to the samurai households, where the rules are different but no less cruel. Imagine a woman named Yuki, married to a samurai. Her life revolves around upholding her husband's honor, a burden that weighs heavier than any armor. If her husband dies, in battle or through seppuku, she's left vulnerable. Widows like Yuki often face poverty and isolation, their status tied to a man who no longer exists. Some are expected to follow him into death, either through jigai, a ritual where women cut their throats while tying their legs to maintain a proper posture, or by retreating to a convent. These convents aren't places of spiritual solace. They're exile, a way to remove inconvenient women from society's view. The samurai world is also where the double standard of fidelity is most glaring. Yuki's husband can take concubines, father children, and face no judgment. But if Yuki is accused of infidelity, whether based on evidence or mere suspicion, the consequences are dire. She could face public execution, often by strangulation or hanging, methods deemed suitable for women. Beheading, though rarer, is reserved for grave offenses. For samurai women, jigai is a grim privilege, a way to die with honor. But honor, in this context, is just another cage, forcing Yuki to perform her suffering for the sake of her family's name. Peasant women, meanwhile, live lives of relentless toil. Picture a woman named Saki, working the fields from dawn to dusk, her hands blistered from planting rice. She also cares for her children, her elderly parents, and weave cloth to supplement the family's income. If her husband is conscripted for war, Saki bears the entire burden of the household alone. Taxes, imposed by the shogunate or local lords, are unrelenting, and tax collectors show no mercy. Saki is vulnerable to exploitation. Village headmen or officials can demand favors, knowing she has no recourse. In some regions, a practice called maitoraman allows a man to claim a woman through force or trickery, and if the families later agree, the union is deemed legitimate. For Saki, this could mean being trapped with her abuser, her family's shame preventing her return. Even in the imperial courts, where life seems gilded, women are not spared. During the Heian period, women wear jinahaido, heavy layers of silk that restrict their movement. They follow strict beauty standards, long hair trailing to the floor, faces powdered white, because defiance risks exile to a distant monastery. The court is a world of intrigue, where a single misstep can mean ruin. These women navigate a minefield of alliances and rivalries, their survival tied to their ability to please those in power. Yet, amidst this darkness, there are sparks of defiance. Women like Tomo Guzan and onna-bugeisha take up arms to defend their homes. Kunoichi, female ninja, risk everything to serve their clans, infiltrating enemy households with stealth and cunning. Their stories, though rare, remind us that even in a world designed to crush them, some women find ways to fight back. Let's linger for a moment on the rituals that defined a woman's life. Rituals that seem strange to us, but were inescapable for her. Take ohaguro, the practice of blackening teeth. When a woman married, she stained her teeth black, a sign of her status as a wife. It wasn't a choice, it was a mandate, a visible mark of her submission. Refusing ohaguro could spark rumors of disrespect, a dangerous accusation in a society obsessed with propriety. Even widows continued the practice, signaling they were still bound by their husband's memory. Hikameyu, the shaving and repainting of eyebrows, was another ritual rooted in control. It was deemed refined, but it forced women to reshape their bodies to fit an ideal they had no hand in creating. These beauty standards weren't about vanity, they were about power. Women endured hours of uncomfortable procedures, layering heavy makeup, wearing restrictive clothing, all to meet expectations set by men and the elite. Defiance risked social condemnation, a reminder that even their appearance wasn't their own. In the samurai world, the threat of violence was ever present. The privilege of kirisut gomen allowed samurai to kill commoners for disrespect, and while women were less likely to be targeted, the possibility loomed. A woman could be punished for something as trivial as not bowing low enough or crossing a samurai's path. This constant fear shaped her every move, her every word. The geisha, often romanticized as artists, lived lives of quiet desperation. Imagine a girl named Rin, sold to an okiya at 10. She endures years of grueling training, music, dance, conversation, under strict discipline. As a geisha, Rin entertains wealthy patrons, her charm a carefully crafted performance. But her autonomy is limited. Her patrons can pressure her into intimacy, blurring the line between art and exploitation. If Rin fails to become a celebrated geisha, her future is bleak: poverty, stigma, and a life on the margins. The world that elevates her as an artist discards her when she's no longer useful. In times of hardship, the most vulnerable suffer most. In some regions, during famines, families resort to infanticide, often targeting female infants seen as less valuable. In remote villages, a custom called yobai, night visits by young men, can lead to coercion or assault. If a woman becomes pregnant, she bears the shame with little recourse. An unsafe abortion or abandoning the child might be her only options, each carrying its own devastation. These practices, framed as tradition, are often excuses for exploitation, leaving women like Rin or Saki to navigate a world that punishes them for its own failures. The Senkinkotai system, which required daimyo to alternate residence between their domains and Edo, adds another layer of control. The wives and children of daimyo are essentially hostages in the capital, their movements restricted. These noble women live as honored captives, their lives dictated by political necessity. Travel, even for something as simple as visiting family, requires permission, reinforcing their dependence on those in power. As we move deeper into this story, let's pause to honor the women who defied these constraints, however briefly. Onna-bugeisha like Tomo Guzan, a warrior of the Genpei War, wield the naginata to protect their homes. Their courage is extraordinary, yet their victories are fleeting. After the battles, society expects them to return to their roles as wives and mothers, their heroism a temporary exception. Kunoichi, female ninja, operate in the shadows, infiltrating enemy households as maids or concubines. Their work is perilous. If caught, they face torture and death, their gender an added insult to their enemies. Yet their sacrifices are rarely celebrated, their names fading into obscurity. Convents, too, play a complex role. They're often a last resort for women deemed inconvenient, unmarried daughters, disgraced concubines, or widows with no place in their families. Life in a convent isn't a spiritual retreat. It's exile, a way to hide women who no longer fit society's plans. Yet even here, some women find ways to survive, carving out small spaces of meaning in a world that seeks to erase them. These convents, like the brothels and courts, are microcosms of a society that values women only for their utility. Punishment for women who break the rules is severe. Strangulation or hanging is common, seen as less bloody, and thus more appropriate for women. Beheading, though rarer, is used for grave offenses. Samurai women might be granted jigai, a ritual suicide that mirrors seppuku but with a feminine twist, cutting the throat while maintaining a proper posture. If a woman is accused of plotting against her husband, even without proof, she faces public execution, often with added humiliation. These punishments aren't just about justice. They're about control, a warning to other women to stay in line. By the mid-19th century, the world is changing. Western powers are knocking at Japan's door, and the Tokugawa shogunate is crumbling. The Meiji Restoration of 1868 brings new laws, schools for girls, and the first cracks in the feudal system. But for women like Saki or Rin, change is slow. Peasant women still toil under crushing labor, their lives untouched by urban reforms. Social prejudices about a woman's role, her virtue, her worth, remain deeply entrenched. The Meiji era offers a glimmer of hope, but for most women, it's a distant promise, one they won't live to see fulfilled. And so, we come to the end of this journey, but not to the end of these women's stories. The history of feudal Japan is a tapestry of beauty and brutality, of samurai valor and silent suffering. The women who lived through it, whether in the pleasure districts of Yoshiwara, the samurai households, or the fields of rural villages, were the backbone of this world. Yet their voices were silenced, their struggles buried beneath the myths of warriors and emperors. They endured early marriages, forced prostitution, reproductive coercion, and systemic violence, all upheld by a society that saw their subjugation as natural. Yet within this darkness, there were moments of defiance, women who fought, who survived, who refused to be wholly defined by their suffering. These stories aren't just relics of a distant past. They're a reminder of the resilience of those who endured, whose lives shaped the world we inherit today. The next time you hear a tale of samurai glory or see a painting of cherry blossoms, think of Hana, Aiko, Yuki, Saki, and Rin, the women who live behind those scenes, their struggles and sacrifices woven into the fabric of history. Their voices may have been silenced, but we can give them life again by telling their stories, by refusing to let them fade. If this journey has touched you, hit that like button and subscribe to join me in uncovering more hidden truths of history. Share your thoughts in the comments. What struck you most about these women's lives? What other stories from the past do you want to explore? Let's keep this conversation going because these voices deserve to be heard.